Okay, hello and welcome to the live stream for what is today, January 9th, 2019. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do pretty much every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. So hello, people are hopping on. Karen, Alyssa, Cece, Annie, Carolina, Blue Moon, Surf Smurf. Hello, welcome. Good for you, Karen. She says 17 weeks of Duolingo. That is awesome. Isn't that a fun app? Whoever came up with that is just brilliant. They really made learning a new language so much fun. So yes, if anybody is interested in learning a different language, check out Duolingo. It's free and there's a ton of different languages on there, and it's cool. I was doing it for a while and then fell off doing it, but I'd like to get back on because I have all these people from all over the world, and it feels wasteful to not take advantage of being able to practice French or Spanish, or not even practice, to learn. It feels wasteful to not learn these languages when I have people to practice with. So there's a couple of things I wanted to mention before we get going. For those of you that didn't catch Angie and I's live stream yesterday, Travis and I moved back into the house, which was unexpected. I was in Colorado. The whole thing had been very touch and go for the past 4 months. They kept postponing the move-in date, and there was always, delays and excuses and lies, chaos and foolishness and all kinds of stuff going on. But I didn't think that we were going to move in until the end of January. So we didn't have, we'd already started and stopped utilities a handful of times. We'd already started kind of had packed some stuff, and then we would unpack it. And then we hadn't moved in. We hadn't settled into the apartment because we didn't plan on being there for any length of time. We were originally told they'd have the house done, repaired in about 4 months, and it was actually 8 months. So the apartment, we just had boxes everywhere. I mean, we had boxes for our footrests. We had a little tiny futon that was sitting on the floor. It was just living like squatters. It was really an uncomfortable time, but we are back in, so that is very exciting. And we've been unpacking. And so that's a huge thing to celebrate. It's a great way to start the new year. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about New Year's resolutions and to see how people's holidays went. So I came up with a thing for New Year's. I love resolutions. I love taking time for like reflection and introspection, and New Year's is that, especially New Year's is that time for me where I can look back on the year and think about, what I did that worked and what I did that didn't work, and why that was, and just kind of just visualizing what I would like to bring into the next year. But what has always tripped me up for the past 40 New Years has been, I'll write these things down and then I'll lose them or I'll forget them, and just trying to stay organized with that and to really continue these, these kind of goals throughout the year. So I came up with something that I'm finding to be very helpful, that I wanted to pass along to any of you that might feel the same way. So here is my new process. It's called 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And it goes like this. So the first one is picking one word that you would like to really capture for the new year. So for example, my word is systems. The vast majority of my stress has been due to a lack of systems in place and organization. And so I just have been, and it's negatively impacted a lot of people, and it's just caused a lot of unnecessary stress. So my one word is systems. Then the other one, so there's 1, 1, 2, 3. So the second one is one phrase. So one phrase or mantra that you would like to steer into in the new year. So for example, my phrase is enjoy the moment. And that might seem really cliche, but that's also been a very big thing that I've really struggled with in 2018 was, we had a lot of stress. We had the house fire. There was a lot of kind of the ripple effect of all of that stress is I found myself really either anxious about the future or, just stressing about the moment, or kind of even feeling anxious about the past, dealing, trying to deal with and overcome being in a house fire. So really focusing on enjoying the moment. So number 2 is 2 things, and this is one of my favorite ones, 2 things that you would like to leave behind in 2018. So so mine were procrastination. And a lot of that had to do with my lack of systems. So I would become really overwhelmed by things and I would shut down because I tend to handle stress through either sarcasm or sleeping, but mainly through sleeping. And I just shut down, and it's terrible. And it doesn't solve anything, right? It just kind of compounds the problems because then even less is getting done. And then I'm even more stressed out. So the 2 things I'd like to leave behind in 2018, procrastination. And then the second one was kind of unmanaged mental health. So I have struggled with, like I was saying, struggled with feeling overwhelmed, with anxiety, with depression, as far back as I can remember. And I haven't made that a priority. And so really my priority for 2019 is really getting in tune with myself enough to know because here's the weird thing, even though I was a psychiatric nurse, even though I'm so involved in this emotional health and the mental health community, I tend to really have a huge blind spot when it comes to myself when I'm not doing well. And I heard somebody say the other day, she summed it up so well. She said, there's a difference between being strong and torturing yourself. And I realized, oh my gosh, you know what? I might have trouble telling that difference. And so really getting in tune with myself, realizing, okay, these are the signs when I'm not doing well. So I can start, I'm sleeping. So for example, some of the symptoms that I experience when I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed is I start sleeping a lot and I wake up exhausted. I'm talking just bone tired. I'm just exhausted day in and day out. I could sleep for 20 hours and still be exhausted. I quit caring about my appearance. I'll pull it together for a live stream, but then if I'm out, like nothing matters. I'm so overwhelmed with stuff that I become a mess. Sometimes this is terrible, I know, but like I'll quit showering. There's a few days where I just won't shower because my mind is so busy. It's so full of things that showering is just not a priority. And I know that sounds disgusting, and it is, but I think it's also the challenge because I work from home. So it just doesn't matter. But then it's like I lose track of time and I don't realize, wow, it's been a few days. Like, okay, what's going on? My external environment, my car starts becoming messy. My internal and my house, everything starts becoming messy. It's not who I normally am. So there's definitely a decline with that. And so noticing these things, because for me, it starts to just kind of be this gradual descent. And there will often be kind of these moments where I'll realize, wow, this is not normal for me. This is really bad. And this is a problem. What's going on here? So really paying attention to that and making my mental health a priority. Because I think for a long time, Annie says, it sounds like classic signs of depression. Yes. And again, you would think that I would have more self-awareness because of the background that I have. And I don't. I just really struggle with it. I don't know why. I guess it's because it's such a gradual thing for me. And then things will get really, really bad. And it's generally to the point where I can't cope with anything. I think that's when I kind of realized that I'm at a rock bottom, because any little bump in the road just absolutely levels me and I have a hard time getting out of bed. And that was when I decided this year I've got to seek help. Like, I am not coping. Something's wrong, because these more minor life stressors shouldn't be this debilitating. So just really, I think really just being honest with myself about that, and doing what I need to do to keep myself safe and sane. So two things. So thinking for you, two things that you'd like to leave behind in 2018. And the third one is three things that you'd like to bring in to 2019. So I'd have to think. One of them was, I'd like to expand. This goes back to systems and taking care of my mental health, but really making a concerted, conscious effort to grow my team and getting people on board that can help with email, or that can help with, there's a lot of stuff I just don't know how to do. And I've been avoiding it because I don't know how, because it's overwhelming, and then I just go to sleep and I avoid. So growing my team is going to be one of them. What were the other two? Oh, there were two more. Oh, I'd like to write and publish at a minimum, there's going to be most likely 3 books coming out in 2019. 2 of them are almost done. So, and the third one is a pretty solid working draft. I'll put it that way. It'll probably take me about a good 5 months to really polish it. So publishing a minimum of 3 books in 2019. And I don't remember what the third one is. I'll have to get back to you on that. So thinking about that, I think this is work. And the one of the things that I think can be so helpful with this is thinking about it in terms of 1, 1, 2, 3. You know, kind of this like Fibonacci, like Fibonacci series as far as like goal setting. So 1 word for 2019, 1 phrase for 2019, 2 things you'd like to leave behind in 2018, 3 things that you'd like to move forward into in 2019. So I encourage you to kind of do some thinking about that and what you would like your life to look like. So, okay, let's see. High quality distraction says books. Yes, I have the book, The Narcissist's Playbook, will be coming out. I might even put it up. I feel like I need to put it up for pre-sale, because then that gives me a deadline. Like, I have to have the book out by a certain date. So I might be putting it up for pre-sale by the end of this week. It's already been through several test readers. It's been through 2 different editors. There's still some changes and things I want to make, but the cover is done. A lot of the things about it are done. So it's just me polishing it up and getting it out there. Then the other book that will be done is, it's called Rising from the Ashes. And it's the book that Agata, I don't know if she's here yet tonight, and I have been working on. She's an artist, and all of her artwork, you can find her work at Wholehearted Arts? Let me check. I think it's Wholehearted Arts, plural.com. And all of the art in this book has to do with understanding abuse and healing from it. And it's a wide variety of paintings, and I just love it. I love her work because it's so full of symbolism. And when you look at a painting, you might get some of it, but then reading the backstory to it is just so powerful. So that book is divided into, there's like 70 paintings in there in all. And the book is divided up into chapters as far as like understanding abuse, and then healing from it, and then moving forward and thriving. And so all of the artwork transitions, and then all of the sections, and each section that corresponds to the painting is divided up into, there's the artist note where she it explains the painting, the meaning, the symbolism behind it, kind of what was going, possible. Some of them have to do with what was going through her mind at the time and why she painted it this way. And then there's the author note, which is from me, which explains different concepts in more detail. So for example, if there's a painting about, oh gosh, there's a lot of paint about pretty much every major topic, like gaslighting or post-traumatic growth or PTSD, or all of these different topics and experiences that we all go through, or the vast majority of us go through. So then there's like the author note where I talk more about what this is. It's like, what is gaslighting, and then maybe some examples of it and why it's a problem. And then at the end of each chapter, then there's a section of like old me versus new me, where there's going back and forth explaining the mindset of, this is how we experienced this, or this is how we interpreted or internalized what was going on during this gaslighting. And then now what the healed, empowered version thinks about that, and how us, the new us, would handle that, or how, it's just, so I think it helps to people to understand this in a wide variety of ways. So I'm super excited about that book on so many different levels. And I think I'm really going to work to get that book into universities, because there's not a lot of work out there that's written by survivors of significant abuse. It's generally work that's done by professionals, but it's not the same. There really just needs to be, the interesting thing too about art is when a person goes through something traumatic, there's different parts of their brain that basically go offline. And there's an area of the brain called the Broca Center. And that area is involved in speech and language and language formation. So being able to actually articulate what a person is going through. So that's very common for a person who's gone through something traumatic to either not be able, they're at a loss for words, or they go mute and they just stop talking. And that's why. It's a brain thing that's going on. So there's this whole like neurological component to understanding trauma. The other area of the brain that's affected is the left side of the brain, which is the kind of the executive functioning. So it's a lot of logic and critical thinking parts of our brain. It's the part that is basically what makes us human. And that part tends to go offline, because at that point, when a person's undergoing trauma, our brain is such an amazing thing, what it does for us. And these are all of these different things to keep us alive. So it just shuts down. It shuts down certain like kind of non-essential parts in order to keep us alive. So it's like your brain downshifts, and it starts using your like the limbic system, like the mammal type brain, and your reptile brain, which is more of your base instincts, your fight, your flight kind of thing. And so this is why in trauma, after something traumatic happens, whatever that traumatic incident might be, it might be a house fire, it might be a death of a significant person in your life, it might be being abused, it might be a car accident, or a really traumatic experience at work, a divorce, you name it. This is why we tend to experience brain fog, and we have a hard time. We just feel like we're not being logical. We're doing things out of order. We're doing things that don't make sense to us. We have ideas that might feel like they're good, but they're not, because they're not actually being thought through, because that part of our brain is just not online. So this is why an art book, I feel, is so incredibly powerful. And I know with Agata, with her, oh, hello, Agata, with her experience with painting a lot of these paintings was, when we do, this is the beauty of art therapy, you're bypassing all of that. So you have these areas of your brain that are not online. You have the Broca area, then you have the left side of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, and that's all just, it's not functioning optimally. You can bypass that and still express your experience through art. And so I know she had shared with me that a lot of these paintings, when she was doing them, afterwards, especially when she was having to articulate them and explain them to me so I could work on the wording for it, it was, she was having so many realizations of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that that was what I had intended, or yes, this is what I was trying to paint, but I wasn't aware of it at the time. So it's just powerful because the human brain is just magnificent. So that's the second book that'll be coming out. The third one, I think it might be, the working title for it's called Lessons Learned. But that's, the title's going to change. That book is basically what I feel are the most important lessons for a person to learn. It's basically what healing from abuse really needs to mean. It's so much more than just not feeling emotionally blown apart. It's understanding, boundary standards, deal breakers, our vulnerabilities. I mean, it just goes on and on. Like, there's so many things that a person needs to truly understand before they are truly healed. And when I mean healed, I mean they're able to actually break the cycle and set themselves free. And if they ever encounter another manipulator of any sort, they're not going to stay in that situation for any length of time because they've healed these unaddressed vulnerabilities. They've healed any potential unaddressed childhood wounds. They're just so much more in tune with themselves. So that's the plan for 2019. Good for you, Missouri Cowboy. He says, I took the first step. I did a Zoom thing with Angie and her gang. They were nice to me. LOL. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that they were nice to you. I would not have expected anything less. And that is very brave of you. I know that that's something that you've struggled with for a long time. So maybe one of these days we can drag you onto the book club for that kind of discussion. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Oh, I love that, Rob. That makes total sense. He says, yes, that happens so much when I work on compositions with my students. They discover their creative impulses after the creation. Yes, and it makes so much sense. It's like, just if we can get that logic and critical thinking part of our brain just out of the equation and just let that creativity flow. There's a saying in writing, I don't know who came up with it, but it's so spot on. It says, write drunk and edit sober. And it's basically that, like, you've got to just, get out of your own way and get the words out and then go back and then start organizing them and making sense of them. So if I were to drink and write, I don't think I'd get anything done. But I think that's why you got a lot of creative people, authors and artists that do tend to have drinking problems, because it is, it's a lot easier to be creative when you can just, shut down that part of your brain. Okay, so let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yes, absolutely, Gareth. Spot on. It says the sad thing is after traumatic childhoods is your subconscious and superego try to prove the abuser and how you think about yourself are right. Hence self-neglect, addiction, and so forth. Yes, absolutely. And that's one of, I think, the real milestones or hurdles that many of us have in truly healing from this is reconnecting with our, what's known as like your inner child or like your authentic self, and coming at coming in re in tune with yourself from a place, Pia Melody would call it like the healthy adult. So we kind of have these three forces inside of ourselves. We have the wounded child, we have the critical parent, and then we have more of the healthy adult. And realizing, okay, which side, what am I taking action from? Like, which side is coming forward here? And that wounded child tends to be a lot of that, low self-esteem, taking abuse as truth, really internalizing a lot of that stuff, tending to withdraw. Like I was saying, I get overwhelmed. I just want to run away. That kind of stuff. The critical parent voice is the one that chimes in and is oftentimes an abuser's voice. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just we're being really hard on ourselves and no one's ever talked to us that way, where we're just chastising ourselves. Oh, you should do more. You're lazy. You're this, you're that. And we just really drive ourselves to do something or be something other than we are. And it's not good for us. Whereas that healthy adult is more of that middle ground that has, I think, compassion for both of those other two sides of ourselves, and is able to really kind of find a middle ground there of knowing what's healthy. Basically, you're able to keep yourself safe and sane, and you're able to have the boundaries in place where you're able to sort out your self-worth from your hurt feelings. And so if somebody is telling you a bunch of garbage, we're not immediately internalizing that. We're being like, wow, that, like, I'm not going to own that. Versus the child who, children just absorb things like a sponge, and they take everything at face value because adults, in their mind, adults know best, and they don't. And so there's a lot of things we have to unlearn, I think, in order to become a healthy adult. And that's one of the things. Okay, so let's see. Let me scroll. Truth Seeker says, I wish I could get access to the subconscious. It's all like in this vault I can't get to. Well, artwork might be a great way to try that, to see what comes out. It's amazing if you can kind of get involved in that free form expression and realize, whatever you create, if that makes you feel vulnerable, you can always tear it up. You can always destroy it. It doesn't have to be something that you keep. This is just really getting in tune with yourself. It's also kind of interesting, the whole Rorschach ink blot tests. Not that you need like the official like Rorschach anything, but kind of noticing what are you seeing in different kind of abstract works like that can also, I think it can be very insightful as far as where our mind is and what's relevant to us. So that's another thing to consider. You could probably do something very similar by watching clouds and just noticing what you're seeing in them, and then doing some digging and figuring out, okay, well, I wonder why. Like, why am I seeing that? So. Okay, JJ says, I went to the doctor for high blood pressure, gave me a drug to expand my veins, almost killed me. Now I can't feel the tips of my fingers, and the left side of my heart hurts all the time. I'm afraid. 10-minute diagnosis prescribed. I would say if you haven't already called your doctor, I would do that immediately. So, chest pressure of any kind, the inability to feel the tips of your fingers, none of that I think would be normal. So I would just call your doctor and see what they have to say. And maybe they can either make a med change over the phone, or they could get you in sooner than later. But yeah, I would not wait on that. Call the nurse line. Okay, so Let's see here. Stainless says, I'm having a glass of wine and getting out my paint right now. And James says, artwork for me is too stressful. I'm afraid of messing up. So James, I think I can relate to that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know my mother is an artist, more of a hobby artist, but she absolutely loves it. And one of her things is she has a really hard time practicing anything new because she wants to have a finished product at the end, like a finished painting at the end, something that looks somewhat good, you know? And so she has and I think part of that for her is it's a money thing. Like she doesn't want to, and I get it because I'm the same way. Like she doesn't want to waste supplies, basically. There's a lot of pressure and guilt that kind of comes along with that. So sometimes that's part of it. And then other times it can just be that fear of messing up. My mom took an art class a while ago, and one of the assignments that the instructor had for them was to, they were all painting the still life. And then afterwards, the instructor had them tear it up. And the whole practice was of letting go. And my mom and a lot of artists in the room had a really hard time with that, of actually tearing it up. But it's like, okay, this is just practice. And you've got to learn to just let go. Like, this is it. So there's something very freeing in that. But I think we're all taught too in school of that messing up is bad. We're taught to avoid making mistakes, or we're punished for making mistakes. And so it's just a very different way of thinking about going about creating anything, that there's going to be mistakes. I was actually in a group a few days ago with some friends of mine, and we were talking, and they all have their own business. And so we were just we're all very, very varied interests and kind of businesses going on. And so we were talking about that, like how in the kind of the 9-to-5 world, it's all about, you've got to avoid making mistakes. But when you're more of an entrepreneur, or you're doing your own thing, that's the only way to go about it, is you've just got to experiment, and you've got to pay attention to what works and what doesn't work. And oftentimes it's about kind of this whole failing forward thing, where if you just have to keep trying, and you fail and you examine what happened, and you keep at it, because that's progress. Like, that's what it is. Mina Rose says, have you thought about getting your master's in psychology and being a therapist or a professor? You are truly brilliant. Well, is my mother paying you to say that? I'm just kidding. Thank you. Thank you so much. That I'm flattered that you think that. Yes, I am actually finishing up my master's in counseling. I have a practicum and then an internship. I don't plan on going into private practice or anything like that. My passion is in education and outreach. So the reason I'm finishing, I'll basically be doing the same thing as I'm doing now. But I also would like to teach classes in college, or at the college level. And I would like to do more speaking engagements, especially, well, to professionals, to other mental health professionals, but also just in general. Yes, so that's why I'm finishing my degree, is I think it would help just kind of give more, it would open more doors, I think, for what I want to do. So hopefully that will be completed in 2019. It's interesting, kind of on that topic. I am currently taking a class in crisis and trauma counseling, and I'm so excited about it. It's funny because I think I'm the only person in the room that was just drooling when I saw that as an option of classes I could take this semester. I think everybody else is, really like, yikes, I don't know how to handle this. I don't want to handle this. And it can be very intimidating working with people that are in crisis. But I love it. I just can't imagine doing anything else. And I'm just so excited about that class. interestingly enough, one of the books which kind of validated for me that I was in, this is the right class with the right professor, is one of the books that we're reading is The Body Keeps the Score. And if you haven't read that book, it's fantastic. It can just, trigger warning, just, there's a lot of really kind of graphic stories in there, but it's a fantastic book, and really talks about the mind-body connection and how trauma impacts us. Thank you, Agata, for the live stream donation. And she says, nothing is ever wrong in painting. When you paint, you can let go of all the rules. Creating isn't fixing. That is really well said. I love that. I love that mindset and that attitude. And I think, that's the beauty too of creating is, and I know, like we talk about this all the time, but I think that's kind of the beauty of art is you are creating, and then sometimes you put something down and you're like, oh my goodness, where did this come from? And then it just opens up all of these other doors or different paths to go down. It's just such a cool thing. Sam talking about the critical parent and the inner child, and says, yes, I find this to be so on point, that inner voice saying that we're too lazy or we're too this or we're too that. It's against our nature sometimes. And then I flash back to narcissistic parents and I can better understand where it comes from. Yes. And isn't that so insightful when we're starting to step into that healthy adult mode and we're coming from a place of more so of curiosity and just kind of this non-judgment of just observation, where you start, and I think we all have this, right? Regardless of what kind of parents we had, we start seeing parts of ourselves surface. And we're like, oh my goodness, that is my mother or that is my father. And sometimes we're like, that is the worst part of my mother, or that is the worst part of my father. And sometimes we're like, you know what? This is one of the best parts of my mother or my father. And you're able to see kind of how many of their traits are interwoven and taken on by you. Or if they didn't have that many kind of redeeming traits about them, seeing things in yourself where you're like, you know what, I am the exact opposite of my mother or father, and that's why. It's so powerful when you realize, wow, oh my goodness, these are why some of these personality traits have formed. And I think especially if you have traits about yourself where you're like, you know what, I am this way because my parent wasn't. That is so powerful. And I think it's really worth taking time to acknowledge that and to really celebrate that you have made something so incredibly positive out of something so negative. Kiara says, Dana, one thing I have noticed is that I'm not used to people treating me with respect and kindness. When I set a boundary, I'm not used to people respecting it, and I feel guilty and strange. Help. Okay, let me just say, first and foremost, I just adore all of your comments. You have the most insightful comments week after week after week. So that just needs to be said if I haven't said that before. And this one is, just as insightful as the rest of them. I think when you feel that way, because it is something different. So if you're used to being challenged, if you're used to having to kind of argue your point, and this all of a sudden you're like, wow, this just seems too easy. What's wrong? What's the catch? Should it be like this? Like, are they secretly like stewing inside? Are they going to become passive aggressive, or do they really mean, like, are we cool? Do they really mean, is it okay with them that they're respecting my boundary? And I would just encourage you, it's okay to feel the way that you feel. So that you're feeling guilty and strange, I think that is just part of, especially the feeling strange about that. That's just part of something new. And that's just part of it. So you can just feel the feeling, but keep, even with the guilt, actually, feel how you feel, but keep doing what you know you need to do. So over time, that feeling of strangeness and guilt will pass. And then it's just going to be, because now you're just cultivating a new level of normal. And so now it's just sort of, once you're around enough people that are totally fine with your boundaries, and it just becomes second nature to assert yourself, it truly just becomes a non-issue. It's so easy. It truly is so easy to just be around people where, you know, they ask you, hey, I don't know, here's a thing, like a small example in my own life. Travis and I go out with some friends pretty much every Friday night. We meet at 8:30, and then they normally want to, we do dinner and drinks. I can't wait to eat until 8:30. And so oftentimes I'll say, hey, can we go to eat earlier, or can we do something different? But for the longest time, I didn't say anything because I just didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to, this was their routine that had been going on for 15 years before I ever met him. And it took a lot for me just to say, hey, do you mind? Could we meet earlier for dinner? And it turned out totally not a problem, not a big deal. The vast majority of times, not a big deal for us to meet earlier. And also not a big deal for me to just eat a snack. I felt guilty eating a snack because apparently I eat dinner like I'm 104 years old. I eat dinner at like 5:30, in the evening. So at 8:30, I guess I am old. I like to just kind of settle in. I'm not a big, like, go out to the bar and stay out until midnight kind of a person. So but I felt guilty because that was their routine. Everybody would wait, they'd have dinner at 8:30. I couldn't do that. And I mean, it's ridiculous. It took me like a year to just be comfortable with getting a snack and not feeling self-conscious about it. So the point is, do what you feel that you need to do, and to keep setting your boundaries, and realizing that if people really, for the vast majority of people, it's a total non-issue when you just assert yourself, when you start having opinions and preferences about things. And then also kind of navigating, like, okay, well, how can I be flexible about this? So again, that's my example is a small one, but I think this is the kind of stuff that a lot of us tend to struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So even though my boundary was I have got to eat by like 5:30 or 6:00, or I become hangry and no fun and miserable. So even though that was my boundary of I've got to eat sooner than that, there are times where they can't meet earlier than 8:30. Like, that's just their time. They like doing that. They like being out till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And so on those times when it's not we alternate weeks to decide. If it's not our week or my week, then I'll just have a snack and then we'll meet for 8:30. Totally not a big deal. So kind of just navigating that ground. Let's see. Yes, well said. Heather says, healthy people accept healthy boundaries. Yeah. Healthy people, I feel like, are reasonable people. And if you have a reasonable request, like, nobody has an issue with that. If we were hanging out and you were to say, hey, could we, I've got my kids are with the neighbor, or I've got to do something. Do you mind if we catch an earlier or a later movie instead? Most people don't care. It's not this ongoing power struggle. And if they do care, they'll say, oh, you know what? I would love to, but I have, I don't know, I have a meeting I have to be at. I can't do later. Because both people are being reasonable, then they can renegotiate. So it's sort of like, okay, well, let's figure. So I guess it sounds like this Saturday is not going to work. How about, could we maybe meet? Could we catch a movie next weekend? So there's just kind of this ebb and flow of just two reasonable people being reasonable and trying to in being solutions oriented. So you're continually making it a win-win situation. Okay, let's see. Rob says, never edit while drinking. That's a good takeaway tonight already. Yes, for sure. Let's see. Missouri Cowboys recommending some books and says, Bradshaw's book, The Shame That Binds, Pete Walker's book, The Self-Esteem Workbook, which was last month's book club book. He also recommends Shay, who rejoined us for book club, sent me a list the other day on Facebook of a bunch of books that she recommended, and I need to look into them. We have been very busy unpacking and basically assembling furniture. I feel I could become an IKEA assembler. If there was like an IKEA Olympics for assembling and disassembling furniture, I think Travis and I could place. I'm not even kidding you. We've spent so much money at it. I love IKEA. I know people are like, oh, it's, cheap furniture. I love it. So judge me for what you will, but I love their stuff. And we have been assembling a ridiculous amount of IKEA furniture because we had to. That's the other thing, man. I'll just off topic here. Things I didn't anticipate. Volume 1 is, so we moved back into the house. We lost everything in the fire, or I should say like 99.5% of everything. They were able to save a few odds and ends, but most of it, no. And I didn't anticipate how, thank you, Grace, for the live stream donation, how mentally exhausting it would be to have to go through and pick out everything. And I don't know why I hadn't anticipated that, because when we had to basically rebuild the house on the inside, we had to pick out everything, the paint color, what kind of flooring, what light fixtures, if we wanted to add, more electrical outlets. We ended up converting our pantry and a closet into a half bath. So now we actually have, 2 bathrooms in the house, which, oh my God, is so nice. We took out a wall in the kitchen. It was all of these decisions, which again, when you're already feeling traumatized by being in the fire and then having to make all of these decisions, it was just pure exhaustion. And it was awful. So now I thought we were past all that. And then now we're having to buy all of this stuff. And I found myself the other day on Amazon, because it's easy to fall down these holes where like you look for one thing and then you start reading reviews, and then it's like other products that are similar to, and then you're just this rabbit hole down Amazon. I found myself spending over an hour examining coasters and comparing and contrasting different types of coasters and what worked and what didn't, and this, that, and the other. And finally I was like, this is insanity. I need to go do something else. But it's seriously been like that with every single piece of furniture, having to measure everything. Does this go in here? Does this kind of go with, and neither Travis or I have ever had a house where it's been all brand new, everything under the roof. And so then you become really picky because, you're spending all of this money, and you want it to, you realize, oh my goodness, I can have things that I can create kind of this design aesthetic, and I can have things that go together versus, you're kind of, it's just kind of this hodgepodge of stuff. And now for us, it's all brand new stuff. So I don't know. It's just been very draining. And then also on that same level, we started watching a show. This is my new happy place. Tell me if you guys have seen this show. I think it's the same title as her book. It's a Japanese woman. I think her name is Marie, the magic of tidying up. And so she helps people get organized, and it's such a fantastic show. She is like the Japanese version of Mary Poppins. So, and her whole thing is what brings you joy, and that's something that we talk about a lot on here, is bringing more joy into your life. What feels good and what feels bad, and doing more of being around the people, the places, the things that nourish you. And it's a great show. So we've been, Rob says, a Japanese Mary Poppins, I have to see. She is darling. I just absolutely, she's just so, just, she just is joy. She's just so cute. She's so just sweet and just this pure and joyful and fantastic. Yes. Sashiko says, I love that show, the KonMari method. Yes. And Sifin says, haha, I just watched a bit of that earlier. Yes. And Agata says, lots of joy clothing. Just some of it wasn't giving me any more joy. Yes. And then going through these things and asking yourself, what is giving me joy? So I organized that linen closet today according to how she normally would organize things. And so Travis came home and I had said, you must go look at the linen closet because it brings me joy. I hope it brings you joy as well. And so that's been our ongoing thing is, well, what brings you joy? Anyways, it's a cute show. Check it out. Wonder Woman says, I read her book. She takes things out of her purse when she comes home and puts it in a drawer, though. She says, I get it. I'm poor. I only own one purse. I technically really only own one purse too. I did just buy a purse, but it's more of a laptop carrier. Yeah. So I was like, why would she take things out of her purse? But I guess it makes sense if you're switching purses. I do not do that. So JJ says, I missed the name of the show and where to find it. I need some laughter. Oh, it's such a feel-good show. Is it on Netflix? I don't know. Travis I don't understand. It's like the Saturday Night Live thing. Like, I am but a caveman. I do not understand your modern ways. I don't understand our TV setup at all. I do not know how to turn it on. I don't know how to find things. We just only watch TV and movies when he is home, which is fine with me because I've got other things to do. But it's on something. Probably not TV because I don't even think we have mainstream cable. It's on Netflix. Okay, Grace is saying it's on Netflix. Yeah, highly recommend it. It's the magic of tidying up, I think is what it's called. Okay, so let's switch gears and we'll hop into the chat with questions. Okay. So thank you guys for kind of humoring me as we went way off topic there. Stainless says, question, a person in my life sent me a text. Hey, do you want anything from McDonald's? Oh, wait, the line is moving too fast. I can go around again if you want. Is this kindness or pulling me into a fight? Well, I think we would need more context to really determine that. Because I think, it would really, like I said, it depends on context and how well, kind of what the dynamic normally is with them. I think for a normal, reasonable person, that would be a kind of a reasonable, a considerate thing to ask, and then a reasonable response of, you've basically got 30 seconds to decide because the line is moving too fast. And then, but I think it is thoughtful that they were like, hey, I can circle around if you're, really craving fries. But again, it depends on context. I think we've all had really manipulative people in our life that have done kind of like, they'll dangle that carrot, they'll offer something and then pull it back. And then, then any little thing with a highly manipulative person can be potentially them baiting you into an argument or them wanting to start a fight. So depends on context. Okay, let's see. Purple Belt says, Dana, you mentioned movies relating to narcissistic abuse. Have you seen Girl on a Train? Wow, kind of hit home for me. People had recommended that movie. We started it. I just could not get into it. And I guess I just need to sit down and watch it because people keep talking about it. So you're not alone on that. A lot of people have felt that exact same way. There's a few movies out. There was a documentary on R. Kelly that came out recently called Surviving R. Kelly, which I think would be incredibly triggering for most people. And that guy, uh, you know, the stuff that he's been involved in is just not involved in, the stuff that he's done has just been absolutely horrific. And this has been going on for decades. And because he was famous and successful, was able to just get away with it. Okay, let's see here. Grace says, if I've made it a deal breaker that I won't hang out with controlling people, then how do I back out of hanging out with them without giving them the silent treatment myself? I think you need to kind of figure out kind of where in your life you want them. Are these people like in your inner circle and you want them at more of like an acquaintance level, or do you want them at a level where you just don't have any contact with them? Because if you just want them out of your life completely, there is a difference between going no contact and giving silent treatment. Going no contact isn't something that's designed to punish another person. It's designed to be self-protective of, this is toxic for me and I need to distance myself from it. And then you're just done. You just cut off contact. Silent treatment is where a person uses silence to basically punish another person. So generally, if a person's being challenged or disagreed with or what have you, they get silent treatment, just kind of this icy treatment of, well, I'll teach you to do that again or to not do that again, right? So you'll never challenge me again because then I'm just going to ice you out for the next 3 days. And that's not cool, because that's a grooming technique in order to get somebody to change their behavior. Whereas no contact, like I said, it's just cutting the cord. If you're trying to get people that are an active part of your life into like your inner circle into more of like an outer circle, so you still are okay with seeing them, maybe you work with them, maybe they're family, maybe they're people that you enjoy being around to some extent, you just can't have them as a very active part of your inner circle, then then you're basically just distancing yourself. So you're staying busy. You're not, if they call you, you're basically interrupting the pattern. So if the dynamic has been that they basically say jump and then you immediately respond back with how high, that's what you're trying to interrupt. And so how that dynamic plays out is, let's say, for example, they call you, oh my God, I need a babysitter tonight. I just, something's come up. I need you to do this. And your previous dynamic would have been, they called you, you immediately answered the phone, and then you felt obligated, you felt guilty or obligated to comply with whatever they needed from you. Or if they were having some sort of personal crisis and they were calling you and needing to talk for hours on end, and you know, you didn't want to do that, or you were at work, or you know what I mean? Like instead of falling into like whatever they need, that you're falling into that you're interrupting that, and you're switching it to where it's more of, you're regaining your power. So it's no longer this unequal balance of power where they say jump, you say how high. You're restoring that balance. So if they call and it doesn't work for you, you're busy, you don't want to talk, whatever, then you send their call to voicemail. If they text you, you don't text back right away. You get back to them on your time frame, not when they want you to get back to them. If they want you to do something that night or that weekend, and even if you don't have plans, I think it's important that we pay attention to the tone that we're setting. So even if you've got nothing better to do on the weekend other than what they want you to do, it's important to pay attention of just the tone you're setting, and to still not give in to what they're asking. So if they say, I really need you to watch the kids, I know you've got this weekend off work, you know, I'll drop the kids off at 6 a.m., right? For you to just say, you know what, I was really planning on just having a nice quiet weekend at home. So you're coming up with ways of basically of interrupting that pattern and saying, this doesn't work for me. And there's a wide variety of ways that you can say no, or you can say that this doesn't work for me. And those are just a few of them. So interrupting that pattern, giving more space, responding on your own time frame, paying attention to the tone that you're setting, not giving in right away, sometimes saying no, even if you have no like quote unquote valid reason to say no. This is about you doing what you want to do. And then over time, the dynamic will change because they'll learn, oh my gosh, I just didn't think it was ever a problem for me to drop my kids off at 6 a.m. or for me to come over and just start, critiquing your wardrobe, or to rearrange the furniture in your house, or to do, whatever it is that they were doing. They learn real quick of like, that's not going to fly anymore. Okay, let's see. That's very well said. Slavic Princess says, Missouri Cowboy, you're the best. And she says, by the way, healthy resentment is another way of describing righteous anger. Absolutely no aspect of anger is bad at all. It's how you deal with your anger is your character. Absolutely. Anger is an emotion, just like any other emotion. It's equally valid. And the power of anger, if you look at all of our emotions as these are ways that they all have messages for us. These are ways that your body and your brain are trying to communicate to you. Like what do you need? And so if we're feeling anger about something, instead of trying to run from it, instead of trying to not feel it, instead of feeling bad about it and thinking like, well, it's uncomfortable. I don't want to feel angry, or I shouldn't feel angry. I should feel happy. Instead of trying to avoid it, avoid it, trying to figure out, okay, what message does this anger have for me? And then seeing kind of how you need to respond to it. Because generally when we're experiencing anger, it means something needs to change. I think a lot of the time when we're experiencing anger and kind of more mild forms of anger, so like irritation, frustration, and then these kind of progress into anger, resentment, when you're lying awake stewing about things, or just even throughout the day, you're stewing about things. These tend to all be signs of that there's been some sort of boundary violation, and that this is something that you need to address. And again, other people don't know where our boundaries are, and it's up to us to let them know, and it's up to us to enforce them. So even if they do know where our boundaries are, but they're not respecting it, you've got a parent who keeps steamrolling over them. Oh, you really should do this. I'm your mother. You need to do, da 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 da. To have that line in the sand, because when we're able to effectively have boundaries with other people, a lot of that irritation, that frustration, that resentment, that anger is a non-issue. It's not there because we've been able to handle the situation. We've been able to nip things in the bud before it gets so out of control. Okay, let's see here. I haven't. I actually wanted to see that. Gareth says, have you seen the movie The Mule with Clint Eastwood? Great film, true story. I saw the preview for it, and it's on my list of movies to see. Of course, I think everybody loves Clint Eastwood, right? He's fantastic. So I'm up for any Clint Eastwood movie ever. But yeah, it sounds super interesting. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Oh, actually, real quick, back to the anger part, the last part of what Slavic Princess had said about how we express that anger tends to show a lot about us. It tends to show, she had mentioned, it shows our character, and it also tends to show, um, it shows so much. Like it can show a person's level of maturity. It can show it can also be very telling as far as what kind of unhealed wounds a person has, what kind of unhealed wounds we have. That, again, anger is it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable for us, and it can be uncomfortable for other people, especially for those of us that fight defense is not our go-to. So if we're uncomfortable with conflict, if we're uncomfortable with feeling angry or experiencing the anger of others, getting in tune with anger is really powerful, and it can take a lot for us to become comfortable enough to just sit with it and examine it. But it's interesting when you can watch it surface within yourself and to see how is this coming out? How is this expressing itself? Pia Melody talks about us being able to, or kind of like a healthy adult is able to express, how does she put it? Express their reality moderately. And she is so right on about that. It's such a great way to say that, because it's about healthy adults are able to express their reality moderately. So there aren't these extreme emotions of, trying to get their way through rage, or trying to get their way through false flattery, or through, insincere charm, or through, empty promises, or these kinds of things. They're able to be direct, and they're in tune enough with themselves and their emotions that they're able to really kind of navigate their own wants and needs and the wants and needs of other people, and like work towards that solution. So, like I said, all your emotions have messages for you. It's worth sitting with them and figuring out what these messages are, and then paying attention to, wow, I really got triggered, and I reacted in a way that was totally not me. That was so outside the realm. I know that was inappropriate. I don't know where that came from. It can be scary, and I know you guys know this, but these kinds of dynamics, when you're dealing with a crazy maker, it pushes a person to the brink, and it's common for a person to experience rage like they've never experienced before, to sometimes even feel homicidal or suicidal, or just absolutely out of control, that these extreme emotions, because you've got this person who is so illogical, so irrational, so crazy making, so immature and unaccountable for their behavior. That's maddening for any sane, reasonable person. It truly is. And high quality distraction says, an anger can get you into a heap of trouble. Yeah, and you know what? And not only that, not only can it get you into trouble from like the law, or kind of more like social trouble, like family, friends, a work environment. How we express our anger can also really change us. Agata and I were talking about this earlier, about expressing, kind of approaching things. Just hear me out. Approaching things with love, and how that can be so difficult, especially when you've got this absolutely enraging situation, or this enraging person in your life. And I don't mean approaching it with love in the sense of putting up with awful, inappropriate behavior. That's not love. Approaching something with love means you've got to take yourself, you're a part of the equation. So you've got to have enough love for yourself in order to keep yourself safe and sane. But when we're able to see that a person's anger, that their emotions, that's a reflection of what's going on with them. And when they're expressing it, that's their own stuff. And so it can be, here's an example. So you know, there's all these scammers that call people and they'll say, oh, you've got a virus on your Windows and I need to have access to your computer. And for only $49.95, I can get this off your computer immediately. But then really it's a scam and they don't do anything and they just keep charging you money. They drain your account. Well, I used to, when people like that would call and it was a scam, I took it as an opportunity to just let loose. And I would just say all kinds of nasty, hateful things. And I felt very righteous in doing so. I'm going to set these people straight. They're scammers. They don't deserve respect. They don't deserve, being treated nicely. They need to know that they're awful people and, it's okay for me to just unleash on them. And then one day, my mom and I were talking about scammers, and one had called her. And she had said that my mother is just very balanced. She doesn't cuss. She doesn't really scream. She really doesn't get it. She's just very even keel. And she's just a very compassionate, caring person. And anyways, so she had told the guy, she interrupted him when he was telling her, oh, we need money and this, that, and the other, and to fix your computer. And she said, you know what? You and I both know that this is a scam. And she said, things must be very difficult for you in order for you to have to do this for a living. And I'm going to pray for you that things will change so that you can go find work that you can be proud of. And I asked her, I said, well, what did the guy say? Because I'm sure he's used to either people falling for the scams or people raging on him like I used to do. And she said the guy just got really quiet and he said, okay. And I really feel like there's a very solid chance that she was able to get through to him. She was able to reach some part in him that if anybody is going to change, it would be through something like that, through approaching a person with compassion and having their best interest in mind, not through raging on them and shaming them. And that scammer, approaching things with anger, like this wasn't about him deserving respect. It wasn't about him, us needing to be a certain way or, to give that respect to somebody like that. It's more about when we unleash like that on other people and we kind of bring fire with fire, it changes us in a very negative way. And so here she was able to take this whole situation and just make something so beautiful out of it. And she was able to leave instead of feeling all worked up and, she was able to leave and leave that situation with compassion for that person but still keep a safe distance and kind of transmute this whole experience from something really negative into something potentially very positive. At a minimum, it was very positive for her. It didn't ruffle her at all. So I think it's important the way when we're expressing our reality, and if we're able to express it moderately, and if we are able to express it with love or with compassion, that's for us. In large part, it's for us. It's a chance for you to just, I don't know, like to transmute a lot of things. And again, this doesn't mean to have sympathy or to not have boundaries. It doesn't mean to have, allowance for bad behavior. It just means this is whatever they're doing, that's on them. It's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of them. And yeah, so I hope that made sense. Okay. Gareth says, has anyone read Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within? Yes, I have. I really like the vast majority of Tony Robbins' work. I think that's what got me into kind of the whole self-help genre years ago. My gosh, like probably 15 years ago was his stuff. Yeah, Rob was saying, yeah, with my mom, she actively changed the whole narrative with compassion. Yep. And it can be a great way to diffuse the situation too, especially if you've got a dangerous or destructive or potentially deadly person in your life. If we're coming at them with trying to make them bad or wrong, that's how things can really escalate. But if we're able to handle the situation in a way where we're not shaming or blaming them, even if they are to blame, even if there is some responsibility there, I think seeing the situation for what it is, and if a person's not going to be accountable for their behavior, to quit trying to force them to be accountable, to just realize this is just their limitation, and then detach and then distance yourself. That's all. That's really the best we can do. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. I think it was Tanitria who'd asked about, is R. Kelly a narcissist? Yeah, I think his behavior is, I would like, incredibly narcissistic and antisocial. I mean, it's lack of empathy, lack of remorse, lack of respect for others. Uh, he's really into power and control. With him having all the power and control, he's really into humiliation and degradation of women and young girls. There's a lot of, that guy is red flag city. So the manipulative nature of things. I know that a lot of the he's currently being accused of kind of running this sex cult, where he's got all these women that are living there that are kind of quote unquote in this relationship with him. But I think for those of us that have experienced highly manipulative, psychologically abusive people, we know that's not a relationship. There's no trust, there is no honesty, there is no respect there. It's all about him kind of, it's a relationship between a pimp and a sex worker, except these women have been manipulated into thinking that they're actually in a relationship with them, but that's not what it is. Like, there is no sincere bonding there. This has been his pattern for decades. So, I mean, it just, all of it. He married Aaliyah when she was 15. I don't even know, like, there's so many questions. Like, where were her parents? Why was this okay? Why was he not in jail for that? How was that not discussed? How has this gone on for so long? His whole album, what was it? Age ain't nothing but a number. Was all about his relationship with her. Just the kind of rubbing it in the face of people, and just the inability to understand how problematic his behavior is. Like that, it just, that all of that stuff is way outside the realm of normal behavior. Yeah, Vaughn says, yeah, there's something off about R. Kelly. Yeah, there has been for a long time. I remember there was an interview or something I remember coming across years and years ago about, I don't know if it was from his bodyguard, from his security, or who it was from, about how one of their parts of their job was, like, during a concert, that they would go pick out oftentimes some of the most, like, this is what he would tell them, like, he had a type, and his type of girl at that time was really homely. So he was targeting girls that were really not attractive, that who I'm sure any woman in the audience would have been really flattered that here's this really successful, good looking guy who's paying attention to them. But he would intentionally go for girls that were very kind of meek and not very attractive. And then he would have, it was bizarre. He had this whole kind of stage thing. Anyways, he would somehow get to where these women, he would urinate on them. And it was all about just this degradation and humiliation. And a lot of women were coming forward. I think, I have not seen the documentary yet, but I think there were something like 50 women that had come forward saying, uh, their experiences with him and just the level of manipulation and all of that. So Dee says, I'm not sure who R. Kelly is. He is a really popular, or at least he was kind of back in the day. I don't know. Would you say he's R&B? An R&B singer? Yeah, kind of a rapper. Yeah, high quality says, yeah, R&B. Let's see. Lauren says, is having difficulty speaking out loud a side effect of abuse? I get screamed at and I have trouble speaking out loud for days. Yes. So we were talking about this earlier in the chat. I don't know if you were here, but if you get a chance, if you weren't here for that, I would encourage you to go back and watch. I don't know how long we talked about these different things, probably the first 20 minutes or so of this live stream. But yes, there's two main areas of the brain that are affected by trauma. There's the Broca's area, and then there's basically the left side of your brain, which is the part that controls executive functioning. So the Broca area has to do with language and being able to articulate, speech formation, I guess, is really what it is. And so it's when a person undergoes trauma, it's very common that they can either go mute or they have a really hard time finding the words to explain what happened. It's just so overwhelming that they're just at a loss and they don't even know where to begin. That's why. It's just there's certain parts of our brain that just go offline when we've undergone something traumatic. So yes, and here's the thing too with trauma, like what's considered traumatic for one person is very different than what's considered traumatic for another person. So for example, one person might grow up in a home where their parents, there was a lot of yelling and screaming because that's their normal. That might not be traumatic for them. But what might be traumatic for them is, let's say they turn in an art assignment or an assignment at school and their teacher really shames them in front of the class. Like that might be traumatic, and that could drive I mean, it's amazing the different ways people can handle or not handle traumatic situations like that. That instance could potentially push a child or push anybody really into drinking or eating or spending money or potentially self-harm, all kinds of things. So I think that the reason I bring that up is I think it's really important that we're not using that we're using the right measuring stick, that we're not using how other people handle traumatic experiences as a gauge to how we should be handling things. Because like I said, different things are traumatic for different people. So if it's traumatic for you, and here's the thing too, which is really interesting and kind of cool, is when we're in crisis like that, when we're having some sort of traumatic situation and we're feeling this crisis response, we're not able to articulate things. It's system overload, almost like system failure. We start breaking down. We're not handling things. We're sleeping too much. We're gaining weight. We're losing weight. Our self-care is not there. We're wanting to isolate. The message in that when we're in crisis is crisis tends to happen when we've reached the limit of our coping, of our coping mechanisms. So the message in that is, okay, now it's time for us to learn. We need to add on to that. We need to figure out some additional ways of coping. So it's interesting because, everybody handles crisis differently. So all of these experiences in our life, all of the way that we handle things, it's just this constant stream of feedback, and it's all designed for your highest and greatest good. That's what's so cool. It's all for you. All of these experiences are for you. It's for your personal growth. And I know it doesn't feel like that, right? Because it can feel like, oh my gosh, this is so traumatic. And, here I am, I wasn't coping with this whole house fire thing. I was way overwhelmed, and it was just, you know, but if we can take the lesson from that of, okay, this is so, if I, could have been able to have more perspective. Now that things have calmed down, I'm able to have a lot more perspective, able to step back and view how I was reacting, because I wasn't really responding. How I was reacting to things, and seeing, okay, I was really in crisis. These are all of the signs that I was in crisis. What does crisis mean? It means that I've really reached the limits of my coping methods. So I need to develop some other coping methods. That's what that means. And what a gift. What a gift that is. Because now I'll kind of add to that toolkit. And so when the next thing happens in life, because life is all about events happening, then I'll learn other lessons, but I'll be that much more prepared for it. And it's the same in any situation, whether you're when we talk about these experiences with narcissists and these types of relationships, they are such a catalyst for such a tremendous amount of personal growth that we never knew we needed and never knew we wanted. And it's like a boot camp. It's like this emotional health boot camp. And it's this tremendous journey into self-actualization, what you can learn about yourself. And these lessons, just even these events might have happened, these relationships might have happened 5 years ago. There's still so much we can reflect on, because now we're learning about all of this, right? And these discussions are happening, and people are connecting in the chat, and all of these aha moments are happening. We're able to go look back at these different traumatic moments in our life and kind of squeeze out all of these different lessons from them and make this new and empowered meaning from them. It's really cool when you can think about it like that. It's hard to see it that way in the moment when there's so much pain and anger and hurt. But with time, we can reflect and have more of that benefit of that healing that time does tend to bring. Yeah, Stainless says, oh my God, what a boot camp. It feels like the Screaming Eagle at Great America. Yes, that's very accurate. That's very true. Lauren says, I do know I don't need abuse to the point that it makes me physically sick for years, to the extent that I can't lead a healthy life. Too much abuse for too long will destroy you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the big lesson in this, because again, this stuff isn't taught, and it's not because of society. There's all of these different messages we get about wrong messages about what we should tolerate and what's normal and what's problematic. And so all of these messages about love and forgiveness and family and friendship and relationships and commitment and all of these things get so skewed and tangled up that people tend to stay and get stuck in these relationships for years, if not decades. And that's part of the healing, is navigating through, sorting out all of these different messages. That's what my book, the second book, the Out of the Fog book, is all about. It's separating all of that stuff out. But anyhow, when we realize, when we start having that, we get out of the fog, we start having that clarity of, oh my gosh, this is what's been wrong. Like I didn't even realize that this was abuse. I was minimizing it. Other people were minimizing it. I kind of thought, maybe I thought I deserved it. All of these things, we start seeing it actually for what it is. We're like, oh my gosh, this is abusive behavior. And all of my depression and anger and anxiety, and this is a very normal response to being abused. And we start seeing it with this new understanding. And one of the many lessons that we can dig out of that is the realization of, you matter, and it's not okay for other people to treat you like that. And that you, in making that declaration to yourself of, I'm not going to be treated like that again. And so when we talk about self-love, a big part of this is getting to that place where we value ourselves, where we love ourselves so much that we're able to understand when we're being mistreated, and that we're able to respond to it early on so we can respond to it effectively. It's difficult. Don't get me wrong. I get it. It's so difficult for a person to leave when they're so far tangled up in this, and they have finances tangled up and kids and all of that and all kinds of emotions, and they're being blamed, and you've got family that's sided against them and all of that. So I'm not by any sense saying it's ever easy to leave, because it's not. But if we can much earlier realize when somebody's mistreating us, and realize that it doesn't matter. There's no justification for it. It doesn't matter if they're stressed out. It doesn't matter if they are an alcoholic. It doesn't matter if they had a bad childhood. It doesn't even matter if we did something. It doesn't matter if we forgot to buy ketchup at the store. That doesn't give them an excuse to rage at us or to call us names or to treat us. It doesn't give them, another person, the right to behave like that. It's just not appropriate. So there's lots, what I've talked about this before, but one of my big turning points in my healing was I was in the shower and I was crying, and I'm like, why am I so unlovable? What is so wrong with me? Why do I have these people in my life that just treat me like dirt? I don't understand why this is happening. And it was just this realization of, it literally was like, why does nobody love me? And it was the realization of, well, damn it, I'm lovable. I am. And so I'm going to start loving me. And then it was the realization of, wait a minute, that's weird. Why am I just now starting to love me? Like, that was literally my thought process. And then getting out of the shower and just realizing, in part, I didn't really know what it meant to love myself. And so for years, I was kind of doing what I thought self-love was. Like, I was, I bought a juicer. And so I was getting really into valuing my health. And I was, treating myself to like pedicures and kind of doing all of this kind of like self-care, not realize it took me several more really problematic people in my life for me to start really understanding what self-love was, and boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and caring about yourself enough to where that you can be that healthy parent, that you put your safety and you make your safety and insanity a top priority. You're distancing yourself from people or situations that are toxic from you. You're not waiting for concrete proof for them to prove you right, that they really don't have good intentions. I didn't realize how all-encompassing the concept of self-love was. I think it oftentimes, for a lot of people, it takes experiencing a tremendous amount of pain and being treated so poorly that we kind of hit this emotional rock bottom. And then we start having these realizations where we start seeking out ways to stop the pain. And I know you guys have heard me talk about this, but like, people come to these types of YouTube channels, and they get here and they're like, okay, I'm here to learn about narcissists. Why do narcissists do this? Why do they lie? Why do they cheat? Why do they do X, Y, and Z? Or they come here to vent. I can't believe this happened to me, this, that, and the other. And hopefully, if they're here long enough, all of these messages about boundaries and standards and deal breakers and self-love, that starts to make more sense and get absorbed. Because when a person, and I get it too, because when a person's fresh out, all of that just sounds kind of like psychobabble, hippie, woo-woo nonsense. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't have a problem with boundaries. This person, totally manipulated me and stole my life savings. Or like, I don't have a problem with self-love. This person, manipulated me out of my life savings, or whatever it is. It's hard for us to kind of connect how things could have been any different than what they were. And maybe they couldn't have been different. I mean, a person can absolutely love themselves and still get tangled up with the manipulator. Okay. But what we can squeeze out of this is that the vast majority of people have no concept of healthy boundaries, standards, deal breakers, or how to make themselves a priority. That stuff's not taught. 9 times out of 10, the opposite is taught. And so there's this whole kind of deprogramming that needs to happen, and then a positive, empowering reprogramming that needs to take place. So I'm sorry, that was a very long-winded answer or very long-winded response. I hope that made sense. Good. Salon says, I was very triggered and raw when I first came on the live streams. I don't feel so raw now. I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that you don't feel so raw now. And yeah, the live streams, it's one of the challenges that I have with the live streams is there's right now we have about 140 people on, and you have 140 people that are all at very different stages of healing and understanding. And so it can be very challenging to be able to answer questions and address and give support in a way that resonates with them and is in a way that's what they need to hear. It's helping a person move through trauma. It can be a lot like, it's like deprogramming a person from a cult, but it's also a lot like diffusing a bomb, because they're so hurt and angry and confused, and any kind of, you clip the wrong wire and it can just go boom, and they become very reactive, and they're just very much on the defensive. So it's a tightrope act all the time. And so yeah, I'm sorry if you were feeling triggered when you first came on here. It's a tightrope act that I do my best with, but I think that it's just bound to happen. People are going to get triggered by hearing the different experiences of other people too, can also be incredibly triggering. Stainless says, how do you get over the destruction left in the wake, the animal abuse, the broken bones? How do you move forward? I think with moving forward from anything traumatic, there's so many pieces to this, but I think by and large, it's about creating a new empowered meaning from what happened. So there's so much that from all of that pain and all of that hurt and all of that victimization and all of that awfulness, instead of the events that happened, instead of letting these events define you, it's deciding, okay, I am going to take everything that happened to me and I am going to somehow, some way use this towards my highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others. I really strongly believe that that's how we transmute. We're like this emotional alchemist. We transmute all of that awful, that darkness, into something that's light, into something that's positive and inspiring and empowering. Because it's so easy. It reminds me, did you ever see the movie The Never Ending Story? And with Atreyu, and that was the little boy's name, right? Atreyu, and his horse. And he was riding the horse, and they were in the swamps of sadness, and the horse was giving up. Oh, it's gonna make me cry. It was such a sad part in the movie. And Atreyu kept saying, like, no, you have to keep going. You have to keep going. And the horse, and it was just this was like quicksand, and the horse couldn't. He just had nothing left in him. He had no hope for the future. There was no vision for him. And whereas Atreyu was like, no, we have to keep going. We can't stop here, because if we do, we're going to sink. Trauma is very much like that. And it can be so incredibly difficult to keep going when you're exhausted physically and emotionally and financially, and your social supports are exhausted. Everything's exhausted. It can be so incredibly difficult to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, but that's what we have to do. And here, back to the whole brain science behind it, the left part of our brain, that executive functioning, that logic and critical thinking part of our brain, that's also a big part that helps us with imagination and planning, like future planning. And so when that part of the brain is just not online, a person that trauma, it can leave a person very trapped in that moment and unable, feeling they just lose that vision for a future. And so I think it's so vitally important that we try to regain that. And it can be really difficult. It can feel really discouraging to think about a future, to think about even a good future, because it can feel like we're a million miles away from that, but, and we don't have to plan like this ideal future. If it's feeling, it's like the Japanese Mary Poppins lady, what can bring you joy? Kind of reach for that next step. What can bring you joy? So we don't need to create this ideal future of something that's not bringing us joy, something that's causing us more pain because it feels like it's a million miles away. But creating this vision of what might the next few steps look like that could bring you joy. Whatever that might look, I think it's just so important to have a positive vision for the future, to develop that. Even if that future is only 6 weeks out, it's important. And you probably heard me talk about this before, there's certain things in healing that are uncomfortable and that we might not want to do. That might be one of them. Thinking about how we can take what happened to us and use it for our highest and greatest good, and then down the road for the highest and greatest good of others. When we're stuck in trauma, we might not feel like that. We might not feel like we want to get out of the house. We might want to stay and isolate. We might want to, start doing these things, but, or stop engaging with the world for a wide variety of reasons. But I think it's truly so important that we make an effort to re-engage with the world and re-engage with safe people. Let me say that way, re-engage with safe people in safe ways. So maybe friends, like people that have proven with appropriate behavior over a consistent period of time that they are in your corner and that they do care about you. Re-engaging with those people. It's kind of like exposure therapy. If a person is let's say in a car accident, and I'll use my example with the house fire. After the house fire, we had to come over here regularly to make decisions and to talk to the different contractors. And when we were coming over here every weekend for a while and just walking through the house and seeing the progress, and it was really traumatic for me. And the first few times we came over here, I didn't know if I could do it. And it would put me in a really deep, it was really, dude, like the way that insurance companies handle people losing everything really needs to change. Because not only was I in this house fire, but then you've got to go back in and any belongings you have to itemize every single thing in your house. You have 6 hand towels in your kitchen. You have 14 forks. You have a half a gallon of milk in the fridge. It's ridiculous. And it took forever. And so you're sitting here itemizing everything that you just lost. There was just so much, it just kept, the trauma of it all just kept compounding. And then coming back into here and seeing after, when they'd thrown out everything, they'd emptied the whole house. It was just this ongoing trauma. And I kept thinking, like, I don't know if when the house is done, if I can move back in. And how do I tell Travis that? And what happens to us? And you know what I mean? So, but it was good. It was good in many ways, because I realized, okay, I need to become more comfortable just being in this house. Kind of this whole re-exposure therapy, really. And it's a lot like that, the same thing with abuse. So if other people were traumatized, by other people, if you can start engaging with safe people in a safe way, it can help lessen that. It's the wanting to isolate thing is so very real. And the longer we do stuff like that, the harder it is to get back out there and engage with other people. So I think finding here's something that I think, here's something that helped me, and maybe this will help you too. When I was recovering from my first relationship with Jack, and I really just felt like this huge bomb went off in my life. I don't know if I've ever felt that low in my whole life. And my mother, probably 3 or 4 months in, my grandmother was a writer, and she had written a book that had never been published. And it was called something like From Divorce, from Despair to Delight. And it was about her experience with my grandfather, who was a narcissist. And it was, I only knew bits and pieces of what my grandmother had gone through. And so then really as an adult, understanding more of her story, it was in knowing who she was after all of that, I was so impressed with that she was able to stay so loving and so compassionate. And you would not guess that pain had ever surfaced in her life. She never had a bad word about anyone. She just was such a kind, good soul, just a really caring, wonderful woman. And so I guess the takeaway in that was I had the benefit of seeing her life as a story. It was a book. And then realizing that's really what our lives are, our stories. And so kind of what story do you want to write? What story would you hope that your children or that your grandchildren or that your great-grandchildren would say about you? How does your story end? You are the author of your story. You are the author of your life. And so these events happen. Life is full of pain, all kinds of pain. People living in countries where there's civil war and genocide and slavery still in the year 2019, sexual trafficking. There's all kinds of horrors that occur in the world. And living a good life isn't about like somehow, kind of skating around all of these horrors and never being touched by them. Really, I think living a powerful life and living a good life is when these events do happen. A person, they lose their parents at a young age, they get cancer, whatever it might be that happens to them, they go through an abusive relationship, that they're able, the story becomes so powerful when they're able to take that and use it for their highest and greatest good, for the highest and greatest good of others. Let's say they have an abusive parent. They take that, and instead of staying in that swamp of sadness and letting it sink them, they're able to say, you know what, I'm going to do different. And with my children, I am going to be everything that my parents weren't. And I'm going to break the cycle, and I'm just going to shower my child with like love and compassion and nurturing. And they do that. My goodness, there's so many things. Elizabeth Smart, here she was kidnapped and then, raped repeatedly by this man. And his wife was a part of this whole thing. It was horrific. She was able to, go back home, and now she's a huge advocate for different types of domestic violence. John Walsh, the guy that started America's Most Wanted, his son was kidnapped and I won't go into it, but had a lot of really horrific things happen to him, and he was murdered, and he was a little boy. And he took that, and it became his life's mission to then go forward and help other families reconnect with their missing children. He helped give to reach millions of households in the United States, letting them know about dangerous people that were on the run. And he helped put a lot of people behind bars. So he used that for his highest and greatest good. He gave his pain a purpose, and then he used it for the highest and greatest good of others. And when we can change the meaning of these things and use it for something positive, that anger and that hurt, if it's not directed in a certain way, it's like a fire hose that's on full blast and it's just waving around and it's just loose and we never know what's going to happen. And I think it's really important with trauma that we don't wait until the dust settles to then figure out like the impact or the effect. We're not waiting around to be like, okay, well, now what kind of, who am I now? Like, what kind of person am I now? How has this changed me? That we're able to take the reins as early on as we possibly can and realize we don't have to wait for the dust settles to figure out how we've been changed by this. We can make the conscious decision now to start steering into something that's a positive direction. Even if you don't know the whole path, that's okay. You just need to know the next few steps. Like setting a positive course, having that positive vision, and then you're deciding how am I going to be changed? How am I going to use this for my highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others? These are the questions to ask yourself. And it's amazing because the human brain loves a problem. It's like a dog chewing on a bone. It absolutely loves a problem. If you could present it with questions like that, it will start coming up with answers. And pay attention to those answers that it comes up with, because it'll probably start coming up with small answers like, well, I don't know. How do I use this for my highest and greatest good? Well, I guess I could take my dog. I could use this anger and this energy that I have. I can use it to take my dog for a walk. I guess I can use it. I could go to the gym. I guess I could, why not? I guess I have nothing left to lose. I might as well go sign up for that art class. I guess I might, you know what I'm saying? So you're kind of you're thinking about how you can process these emotions in healthy ways. So I hope that made sense. Okay. Okay, good. Good, staying this. I'm so glad. She says, oh, that's good stuff. I'm so glad it is, because that conversation is one of those tightrope moments for me where it is for sure not my intention to minimize or invalidate anybody's experience. And I understand how real and how raw these experiences can be. And it can be really hard to have that talk about using something so atrocious for our highest and greatest good. That can potentially seem very re-victimizing, and that is by far not my intention. So I'm glad it didn't come across in a hurtful way. Okay, let's see here. Grace says, Dana, when I think about what I want to do with my life, my brain begins the flight response or the numbing out response. Any advice? Yes. The fight or flight tends to happen when we start panicking. So a great way to get around that is to chunk it down into something manageable. So let's say, for example, if you're thinking these, again, having this really big vision, but it's not, I think a good vision is one that you feel it's pulling you. You're not having to push yourself. Okay. There's a difference. So if it's pulling us and you feel juiced, you feel on target, you feel on track. You're like, yes, that is for me. And that, like I said, that vision is going to grow in time, and it's going to grow and it's going to change. It's going to change course, because that's what life is about. But as you move forward, you don't need to know every single step in the process. You just need to know the next few steps. So let's say, for example, if well, actually, let me ask you, what do you want to do with your life? Let's see if she is going to answer Grace. Let's see. There's a delay with the live stream. Okay, Wonder Woman is saying that she never gets to the juiced part because she always feels too panicked. So, okay, so this is a sign. If the vision that you're here, okay, let's back up a little bit. So this is really common for people at the beginning of the new year. People are talking about resolutions. A lot of people do vision boards. I normally do them as well. And it dawned on me a while ago that I was doing them in a way that wasn't productive at all because I was creating these, either I was creating this vision of really what I felt like I should want, like, oh, I should want $1 million and to go to Egypt and to, to have a fancy car. And that's not me. Like, that's not me. And that's okay. But I felt like if I wasn't setting these kind of grandiose goals, that I wasn't thinking big enough. And so now it's sort of like I've gotten more in tune with myself. So it's like, okay, that's really, I don't care, but I really don't. I mean, it would be cool to go to Egypt, but honestly, it doesn't really juice me. Like I'd rather go up north in Michigan and rent a cabin on a lake. So it's whatever juices you. And so that vision should pull you. That's when you know you're on track. So let me scroll up here and see, did Grace answer? Okay, Grace is still not answered. So let's say, for example, if your vision for your life is, I don't know, let's say that you want to be an attorney, right? And you want to go to law, you want to be an attorney, and you really want to work with people that are dealing with narcissists, and you want to try to change the system and help. You want to be the attorney that you wished you had, is basically what it is, right? And that can feel really overwhelming. Like, oh boy, where do I even begin? Am I smart enough to go to law school? What test do I have to take? And how would I afford it? And there's a million questions surrounding that, right? But then realizing you can set a timer. This is a tip. Set a timer for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and then power through whatever that next step is. Maybe it's writing out a list of questions to ask somebody. How do I do this? How do I go to law school? What kind of tests do I need to take? Entrance exams? What are their qualifications? And how much would it cost? And are there grants and scholarships? So you're just chunking it down into like manageable bites. And it's the whole, what is it? Analogy of, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. So I have big goals. Now that I'm more in tune with who I am and what I want, I have really outrageous, big, hairy goals, things that I want to do with all of this. And that can get really overwhelming. So, and this goes back to one of my top things for 2019 being systems. That's the foundation. You can't build a castle without a solid foundation. So kind of thinking small, getting that groundwork out of the way for whatever it is. Wonder Woman says, I actually thought about being an attorney to help women going through divorce with a narcissist. I'm old though, I'm almost 48. Well, I'm 41, and I had an attorney. She was, interestingly enough, she had moved to Michigan from another state. Her ex-husband was incredibly physically abusive, and she was basically on the run for her life. She didn't go to law school. I think she was in her 40s when she went. So, I mean, I'm 41 and I'm finishing up my master's. So we get the clarity when we get the clarity. And it's okay if you don't want to go too. Goals change. Sometimes we think that it's a certain thing we want to do, and maybe the purpose of that goal isn't even necessarily to be an attorney. Maybe it's to be more of an advocate, and maybe that is still something that you can do. And talking to attorneys and doing outreach and being able to support people, or even just giving resources to them. Rob says, I'm 54 and just finished my DMA. What is a DMA? Pardon my ignorance there. I've never heard that acronym before. How old? Grandma Moses. Hold on. Grandma Moses, who was a famous American folk artist, didn't begin painting until the age of 78. So there you go. Lots of people have done many, it's not like we just, well, gosh, I'm over 40. I guess that's it. It's been a good ride. I'm just going to, go on shifting the neutral and just go on cruise control for the next, 50, 60 years. I really feel, man, you're just getting started at 40. I think a lot of people feel that way. Like you don't even know what you're doing until you hit about 40. Like I forget who said that. Maybe Oscar Wilde. Somebody famous had said that, yeah, basically like you don't know what you're doing until you hit 40. Everything before that was just practice. And I would have to say, I feel like there's a lot of truth to that. Because you have to kind of get seasoned by life. Like you have to kind of deal with a difficult boss, or possibly get fired, or, deal with an awful landlord, or work a terrible job, or you have to have these unpleasant events in life to really kind of understand the full experience. I really do kind of pity people that have never struggled like that. I think about Paris Hilton. What must that be like, to just have everything handed to you? In many ways, I don't mean to say that she doesn't, has never experienced pain or struggle, because I'm sure she has in her own way. But to not have so much of the struggle in life, it makes us stronger. It makes us more resilient. It helps us for reflection and introspection and who we are and who we want to be. And, there's just so much that can be gained from that. Okay. Doctorate in music is the DMA. That makes sense. That's very cool. Good for you. Yeah, Rob says, yeah, Sheryl Crow, 56, totally kicking it. Mick Jagger, how old is that guy? He's been rocking forever. And from what I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast thing the other day, and I forget who it was. Somebody on there had either seen Mick Jagger in concert, or they had toured with him. And they were like, that guy has the energy of a 20-year-old. Like he just goes and goes and goes. And JJ says, I will not go into debt for a degree at this age. I won't get work due to age anyways. It's too little too late. And you know what? I think sometimes there's so many different paths that we can take. So because there's so many different ways that a person can fulfill that dream. So if maybe the original dream was, oh, I really wanted to become an attorney and do this. If the underlying drive or desire there is, I really want to be able to support other people that are going through abuse or going through a difficult divorce. There's so many different ways to do that, like offering different attorneys potentially resources. Honestly, even there was a gal when I was going through all of this, I'll make this short. I was having a really hard time. I didn't know anybody here in Michigan, and everything had just blown up in my face, and I was going to lose everything. And it was, again, a really, really low period in my life. And I had put it out on Facebook in this group I was in that I needed help. Like I didn't know anybody out here, and I just needed I basically just needed somebody to talk to and somebody that could give me a hug and tell me it was going to be okay. And a guy in the group had contacted his sister, and she had called me and said, "Hey, do you want to go for coffee?" And we both, she didn't live anywhere near me. She was driving like a good 45 minutes. And I was driving, I mean, we met in the middle. We were both driving quite a ways to meet for coffee. And anyways, there was a gal that, a friend of hers, who had a bunch of like business cards printed up that said like I probably still have it in one of my old wallets. It was like free hug. You know, if you need this hug, just ask. And these were cards that she would give out to people. If you're having a hard time and you need a hug, just ask. We're more than happy to do that. And I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. And it's such a great, it can mean so much to somebody. Just a kind word, a friendly smile, listening, just listening to them, and just being there. There's so many different ways that we can support other people without having to, you know, get an advanced degree or, you know, start a nonprofit or any of these huge things. The little things done on a daily basis, I think, make just as much of an impact. Yeah, high quality. Distraction says hugs are medicine. Yeah, there, it's huge. You know, you think about how many people are truly just walking around out there just feeling so incredibly low, and it's heartbreaking. Yeah, EK says, yeah, friendly strangers who strike up conversations with me near cash register make my day. It's way better. Yes. Yeah, truth seeker. We're talking about age. Truth seeker says, yeah, who wants to be young in an age that defines females dating as sexual market value? Blech. Or even men, right? Like, people understanding that people have this different kind of like social market value, that men are valued for the money that they earn, or I don't know how much hair they have, or whatever, how muscular they are. And women are only valued if they're, you know, a certain age, and, you know, they're attractive and whatever. Yeah, I don't need anybody. To me, that's just, it's so short-sighted, and it's so one dimensional. And it's like, boy, I feel sad for people that that's how they're viewing other people, because they're just missing out so much. Rob says, a young guy just drove by on his bike a few weeks ago and smiled and said hi. I was overwhelmed with love and gratitude. I was speechless, actually. Seriously, it is the little things. One of my, I had totally forgotten about this till you just said that. One of my early experiences when I had first moved here, there were some kids, there's a lot of fruit trees in Michigan, and the people down the street, I don't know if it was a pear tree or an apple tree, and these kids had a bunch of fruit, and they were walking down the street and they were coming towards me, and I wasn't sure, you know, I don't know, they were teenagers. I'm like, I don't know if they're gonna, I just didn't know what they were up to. You know what I mean? I didn't really know what they were carrying. I didn't know if they were going to be rude, or if they were going to, you know, if they had stolen something. I just kind of, my mind went to like the worst place scenario, you know, worst case scenario. And as I'm walking by, you know, past them, they're like, hey, we just got a whole bunch, I forget, apples or pears. Do you want any? And they were so super nice. And it was just that little moment of, wow, that just totally restored my faith in humanity. I didn't, you know, like, wow, kids still go outside and they still pick fruit and they still, you know, do these things. And anyways, it turns out, just in case you're wondering, these neighbors that did have the fruit trees warmly welcomed people picking fruit off of them, because they had more than they could ever eat. So it's not like these kids were just going around stealing fruit off trees. But yeah, it's little things like that that truly just make a huge difference. Let's see. Gareth says, Dana, do you think meditation should be taught in schools? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think a type of like emotional regulation, emotional health in general should be taught in schools. It just gives, like we're all born into this life and we're given this amazing gift of a body and of this complex brain. It's truly just like throwing somebody the keys to like a Lamborghini, like this amazing machine. But it's only amazing if you really know how to use it all and how to understand it. And I think it's sad that we don't teach this kind of stuff earlier on, so kids can start, so they don't have to learn the hard way, like that they just understanding how different this is how your brain works. This is how with trauma, instead of waiting, just as an example, like instead of waiting until somebody actually goes through a trauma and then they can't handle it anymore, they're so broken and they're so overwhelmed and suicidal that they finally come crawling into like a therapy session or to their doctor or a hospital, to then start having these discussions about grief and loss and trauma and like what's a normal response and how to handle these things. Like this stuff isn't normally taught until a person's like smack in the middle of it, and that's a hell of a way to learn. And it would be so much more beneficial to teach this stuff like way upstream about how do you handle grief and loss, what is normal, how do you handle anger, understanding the default responses, that we all have these default responses. Some people default when they get angry or frustrated, they go into fight mode. Some people go into flight mode. Some people go into freeze. Some people kind of go into that friend mode. We all handle things differently. And to know yourself well enough, how do you handle stress? How do you handle frustration? How do you handle rejection? Because these things are going to happen. It's very rare that a person, never is faced with breaking up or getting dumped by a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or having to quit a job, or getting fired from a job, or these things. And again, like it would be so much more helpful if we could teach people about how to handle these kind of significant stressors in life before they actually are faced with it. And meditation, I think, is fantastic. Learning to just be silent and be present in your own body, and the body awareness that can come with that is huge. And the emotional control and understanding kind of the difference between healthy, how to express our reality moderately, and and teaching. I was saying earlier about how when scammers or even telemarketers, this is years ago, how I would be really ugly and hateful to them. And not only that, but if I were to get frustrated or angry, I felt totally, I would just become, real bitchy, real hateful. And I confused that with being assertive. And I thought, okay, I'm just laying it down. I'm telling it like it is. And I felt totally justified in how I handled such, and this wasn't very often, but I felt justified when I would behave like that. And now I understand, oh my gosh, that is not appropriate behavior at all. That's not a sign of being assertive. That's a sign of immaturity. And it's not appropriate. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you just like teaching this stuff, teaching kids, like, this is how to express yourself. This is how to actually be assertive. This is how to self-care. This is how to care for your body. This is how to care for your mental health and wellness, and your physical health and wellness, and all of that stuff is just so important. Let's see here. JJ was saying, oh, okay, I get it. Kind of a pay it forward thing. I'll really work on that. I do have a lot to give to the right people. Yes. And then also realizing that if whatever we're giving is not being warmly received, that's not a reflection of you. Like, you know, your intention, right? If you know your intention, hey, I'm coming from a good place and this is what I'm trying to do. And if they're not open to it, then that's a reflection of where they are. So it's so much easier when we just don't take things personally. If somebody, we'll flip the situation. If I was a telemarketer and I called and some woman sort of raging at me, realizing that doesn't make me bad or wrong or somehow less than, that lady's got issues, right? Like, that's on her. So seeing other people's inappropriate behavior as a reflection of them, not as a reflection of you. That's a big part of it. But here's something for those of you that are thinking like, okay, I really would like to give back, but I'm kind of intimidated. I really want to be able to give, pay it forward to the right people or pay it forward in like a safe way. I think you've heard the whole, like, people go in like a drive-through and they pay for the meal, up to a certain amount for the car behind them. And you buy them a coffee. You're at, I don't know, McDonald's or Starbucks or wherever people get coffee, doing that. Or something that I really like, this is one of my big picture visions, is I got this from an art seminar conference thing I went to, I think a year or two ago. It was so cool. These people, so this is something that's free. So if money is tight, this is something that anybody can do. And I think it's a great thing to do with, a great exercise to do with kids. And it can be a great exercise to also do with people that are struggling with like mobility issues, that might not be able to leave the house, or that aren't comfortable engaging with other people for whatever reason, and that they want to spread a little bit of sunshine in a safe way. Is you can either go to Home Depot or wherever and buy rocks, or you can just start going for a walk in the neighborhood or going in your backyard or out front, finding rocks of different sizes. And what they were doing in this conference thing is the whole concept was kindness rocks. And then literally finding rocks and then putting kindness on them. So painting joyful picture of a sun or of a rainbow or of just a pretty color or whatever makes you feel joy, whatever that, something silly, something, whatever it might be. And then either writing, depending on the size of the rock, you can either write an inspiring quote. You can do, you can use Sharpie marker, or you can use, depending again on the size of the rock, using black paint, or paint on the back of the rock so people can read it. And so what these people were doing is they were painting these rocks of just little affirmations. You matter. You are important. Smile. Today, make today a good day. These kinds of things. And then they would go hide them like little Easter eggs all over the city, which I think, how fun. It's activities like this where I'm like, I really wish I had some kids. I just think that would be so much fun. You can go put these on, off to the side on like little walking trails, or, on a tree branch in your local park, or even around your house. And then as people find it, it just puts a smile on a person's face. It makes you feel good. It makes them feel good. Just little rays of sunshine. Totally. Yeah. Wonder Woman says, I paid for the sheriff's ice cream in the line behind me. He was so happy. I am driving a car that is 18 years old. I am struggling, but it was such a good feeling to show my appreciation to him. Yeah, it is. It's, it is those things. It connects us as human beings. And it's so amazing how that little act of kindness can go so far. you know? And I think it means all the more when we make these little acts of kindness, when we don't wait until we've got, lots of money in the bank, or when we don't wait for down the road someday when we find ways in small ways on a regular basis that we can do those things. You could buy a person an ice cream cone, or painting a rock, or giving a smile, or holding the door open for somebody. These kinds of things. It's true. It's just random acts of kindness. And I think the benefit too of these random acts of kindness is it can be such a great way to get out of your own pain, and to get out of your own pain and to do something considerate for others. I don't know why there is so much magic in that, but there really truly is. It just helps to cut through that pain. If you know somebody that's going through a divorce, or an attorney who works with a lot of divorced clients, you could you could print out those business cards that say, hey, if you need a hug, or words of affirmations on business cards, and just give them to your attorney, or just give them to an attorney, or leaving little quote. I mean, you could do all kinds of things that people can do. That's a fun idea. Missouri Cowboy says, yeah, you don't have to be a kid. Let the kid inside paint the rocks and hide them. Some groups post pictures of where they found the rock. I love this idea. How cool. They post pictures of where they found the rock, and then they hide them again, and they pay it forward. How fun would that be? Yeah, you could start some sort of Facebook group, or at the bottom you have it. You're like, find out more about this rock. And then you have maybe your group is called Random Acts of Kindness. And then people go on there and they take a picture of themselves with the rock. And then maybe, and then it just goes on, and then it just connects people. It's how fun would that be? Okay, so let's see. Let me scroll up here. Oh, high quality says someone did that for me once. They paid it forward. I went to my car and had a good cry. Yeah. Yeah, it can be yeah, it can be really powerful when somebody does that, and they just don't even realize like what you're going through. It can mean the world to another person. Let's see here. Gareth says, yeah, this is true. School should be totally different to how it is. And he says, Missouri Cowboy, and oh my goodness, in 5 years, 5 close family members died. Oh my goodness, my mother and father died 4 months apart. I find it very difficult to talk about myself. Yes, that's a tremendous amount of loss and pain in a very short amount of time. I'm so sorry. And I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad. I don't know. I'm glad. I'm thankful for you guys. I'm thankful that we have this community of people, and that there are. This kind of stuff, this kind of connection with people talking about these deeply personal things, and other people in the chat reaching out and connecting with them, and all of that. It just really is such a beautiful thing. It's just so cool, and it's from all over the world. That just never gets old. That's just the coolest thing to me. That we have Kamami, who's from France, and there's different people from all over the world here, and just giving kindness to strangers, and letting listening, you know, and caring is awesome. Oh my goodness. And Gareth says, and my brother killed himself. That the fact that you are still going after those 3 significant deaths, and then there's 2 others that you haven't even mentioned, it's impressive. It's really impressive. That's a lot. That's a lot. Annie is talking about volunteering and says, I hadn't considered a library, but I like libraries. I volunteered to shelve books during lunch way back in middle school. Yeah, that would be cool. Just, you know, making the world a better place. Okay, let me scroll up here. See, Kiara says, Dana, what are some ways we can stay grounded? I feel like the base of all healing is being able to be present and not abandon yourself, to commit to the day. How can we do that when our minds want to run? You ask such great questions. I think one of the reasons that we try to escape reality is because it's when reality is uncomfortable. This is when we start doing, you know, we start watching a lot of TV, we start watching a lot of movies, we start spending money, we're on the internet way too much, we're drinking, we're using drugs, all kinds of ways for people to kind of numb out and try to run away from what's going on. I think the easiest way to get to stay present is to make the present moment, to make peace with the present moment. And that can be very difficult, especially when the present moment is painful and there's a lot of stuff going on. But perhaps perspective helps with that. Realizing, you know, I know it's cliche, but it's so true, of the whole, like, this too shall pass. And that this is just, that life is a series of events and that you're just experiencing an event. Or maybe that there's been this culmination of events and now you're trying to really process everything that's happened. And I don't know, I think making peace with the present moment, a lot of it has to do with assigning the most empowering meaning that you can to something. So if you do go through something incredibly tragic and painful, and not to say that you need to do this, not to say that you need to do this in general, but for sure not that you need to do this right off of the bat. It's normal to go through the grief, the anger, the hurt, there's a whole wide range of feelings with any traumatic situation that we go through. But to kind of keep your eye on the prize of, okay, I'm going to work towards assigning this in time as the healing occurs. When I get on the other side of this, right? That the other side of this is going to mean when I'm assigning an empowered meaning to what I've experienced as much as I possibly can. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others. So for example, trying to think, let's say let's say you have a death of a significant person in your life, and it just feels like a bomb went off in your life. It's so traumatic. I think one of the ways that we can kind of do this, giving this empowered meaning and transmuting all of this darkness and grief and pain into something positive is then honoring the person. So I think so oftentimes, especially in American culture, we focus on the mourning of a person, but we kind of miss the honoring of them. So there's all of this time and focus on remembering the day of their death and going to the cemetery. And to me, I think it's so much more, I don't know, it just resonates more with me to be like, okay, well, what was really significant to that person? Let's say if they really loved motorcycles, right? To then be like, okay, I really want to honor that. I want to keep their memory alive. And so maybe you work towards doing some sort of charity drive where that pays for, I don't know, motorcycle education courses for people, or something that they would look down and smile and be like, yes, what an amazing tribute to my life. What a gift that somebody was able to remember me in such an amazing way. They knew that that was significant to me, and they continued that on. That this person, I don't know, you had a significant person in your life and they loved to garden, and then you plant a tree in their honor, these kinds of things. So it's this living, powerful, positive meaning that you're making out of this. Does that make sense? So I think that's it. So it's making peace with the present moment, making the present moment as basically making friends with the present moment as much as you possibly can, realizing that all of these emotions, they have messages for you. And it's all stuff that, either stuff that we need to work through or that we potentially need to work on. But all of these messages that are coming to us, they're designed to keep you safe and sane. They really are, even though it doesn't feel like it. And interestingly enough, all of these coping methods that we have are also designed to keep us safe and sane. So if a person is coping in a way, if you watch any of these shows like My 600-Pound Life, you see time and time again, it's this woman or this person was in an abusive relationship, or they had a parent that died, or they were getting bullied. There was generally some sort of traumatic events in their life that this was how they were coping through food. Food always tastes good, and it's the friend that never judges you, it never bullies you, right? But then it becomes way out of control. And so now they're trying, but the thing is, the food was their brain's way of trying to nourish and nurture themselves, but it just took it to a really maladaptive place. So it's in examining these things. If we find ourselves on the other side of abuse with, okay, now we've gained or lost a lot of weight, we've spent a lot of money that we don't have, we've maybe perhaps become promiscuous, trying to find love, but confusing that with sex. We've kind of lost ourselves in alcohol or drugs or any number of things, realizing that there was a reason for that. It might not have been a conscious decision, but that's how a lot of this, when addiction of any kind, just it grabs you. Nobody starts off in life thinking, I hope I'm going to be an alcoholic by the time I'm 50. That doesn't happen. It's just this kind of stuff just grabs a person. So it's cultivating that compassion for yourself and getting comfortable with the present moment and realizing that you are coping in the way that you best know how. But if the way that you best know how is something that's actually hurting you in the long run, then it's time to start kind of expanding that toolkit of ways of coping. Oh, totally. Missouri Cowboys talking to Rob and Gareth and says, yeah, society seems to teach so many men not to grieve. Yes, so many, uh, so many awful messages that I think, uh, when people are born into culture, so many of these messages, it just seems like, well, that's just how it is. We don't even stop to question if these messages are still relevant, or if they were ever even valid to begin with. And one of those toxic messages for men, especially, and boys, is, you don't cry, you don't talk about certain things, um, you suck it up. And that's really toxic programming. And because every male or female, people have emotions, it's a big part of being human, and they're there for a reason. And to cheat, basically, to cheat boys and men out of connecting to that side of themselves is just tragic. Because down the road, and I think there's a lot of guys out there that I think have so much anger that if even talking about that or reconnecting with their emotions, their defenses go up. Oh, you're just trying to sissify men. You're treating us like we're broken girls, and they become very reactive. And it's like, no, this is not about treating you like a broken girl or making you into a sissy. This is about treating you like you're a human being. And however you want to handle certain things in your life, that's fine. But at least having the fundamental understandings of emotional health. Because what happens, and as a nurse, I've seen this time and time again. What happens is when men are not in tune with this stuff, because a lot of guys will discount it. Oh, I don't need that. That's, again, like, I'm not a sissy. I don't want that. I don't need that. But then what happens is, because these emotions have a message for us, if we're not dealing with that, our brain just gets louder and louder. And it's going to continue to try to get our attention. And so it's just, if we're not becoming responsive to these messages, then this stuff it's just going to start surfacing in all kinds of bizarre ways that are seemingly unrelated. But if a person doesn't have that emotional awareness, odds are they also don't have that physical awareness. So then you get a lot of guys, that are coming to the hospital, they've had a heart attack and don't even realize it. They, have really high blood pressure. They don't realize it. They're in extreme amounts of pain, physical pain, and they don't realize it. And until things have gotten so bad, and then they finally go, my aunt is like this. She, for a wide variety of reasons, is just does not have that body awareness. And she had a really bad kidney stone. Anyways, I took her to the emergency room, and we'd always considered it, oh, she just has a really high pain threshold. She doesn't get any Novocaine when she goes to the dentist and has work done. That's how high her pain threshold is. But that's not necessarily a good thing, because she's out of tune with pain when it's really bad. And I had to ask her, I had picked them up from the airport, and she crawled into the back seat of the car. And I bent down and I asked, because my mom had said, Aunt Margie's not doing good. Like, I don't know what we need to do. And when I got there, I had said, hey, do I need to take you to the emergency room? And she was hesitant, but she said yes. And then when we get there, she's in so much pain and she can't even articulate that. And she was telling them, oh no, my pain is only like a 4. It's like, well, no, it's, you crawled into the backseat of the car and now we're in the emergency room. Your pain is greater than a 4. But that kind of stuff for people that are not and don't have that body awareness for whatever reason, this stuff there's no way around it. Like, we have to get in touch with these emotions and these different physical sensations when something's off balance, because it leads to problems down the road. Let's see here. Sam says, yeah, he says, everything that Dana is saying these are the kind of the words that a narcissistic parent bashed me constantly since I was a really young child. I still remember I was almost 5 and fell off a playground game and dislocated my shoulder. And yeah, it's terrible when people discount other people's pain. Obviously, dislocated shoulder, that's incredibly painful. And it's, even if you hadn't dislocated your shoulder, uh, you know, falling, that kind of a fall, that kind of an injury to really hurt yourself, that's still scary when you're 5 years old because you don't have the life experience to have that perspective, and everything is so big and you're so little. So it's just, it's scary. It's where a person is, oh, with, with understanding their own experiences. And so, yeah, it's sad. It's sad when it's sad when anybody gets invalidated like that. And there is a ripple effect to that, especially with children, because we tend to absorb that of, oh, if you're, if you're scared, there's so many emotions that we all tend to just invalidate if we're not aware of it, that's a problem. If a child is scared, if a child is in pain, these kinds of things. And if we're continually telling a child, oh, you're fine, there's nothing you're fine, that doesn't really hurt, that's not really that bad, that thing isn't really that scary, their internal GPS system just gets all kinds of screwed up. And then they're really out of tune with these feelings, and that feeling of fear, the feeling of hesitation, the feeling of pain. These are all, it's really important that we're in tune with that, because those are probably some of the most significant emotions that have messages for us, is fear and physical pain. So it's, yeah. I think too, with men that have gone through abuse, it's difficult for them. They don't normally, women don't even oftentimes understand when they're being abused. So, and men, I think even less so. So they deal with it in the way they can deal with it. Perhaps one of the best movies that I can think of that talks, that has to do with kind of handling traumatic events, and I think especially kind of like how men tend to handle events is, and this is an extreme movie, but I think it's really great about how the different ways people handle trauma. It's the movie The Deer Hunter. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's very triggering, but it's fantastic. These young guys go off to Vietnam, and what they think their experience is going to be and what it actually ends up being, and then how they're received when they come home, and how they just feel so unable to assimilate, and they're just so profoundly changed. It's a great movie. Sarvio says, should you keep your young children away from narcissistic parents? I think a good kind of guiding North Star with that is, as a parent, it's your job to protect your children's safety and sanity. So that's your number one job as a parent, is to protect your children. So it can become really awkward if the danger is family. So sometimes that can be kind of a difficult line to walk. It depends on what you're exactly talking about as far as narcissistic parents go. If they're, if they're going to drive a wedge between you and your child, that's a problem. And I would encourage you to kind of either distance yourself or kind of navigate that line, but to realize that it's okay. Like, your relationship with your child is a priority. So if they're, creating this toxicity there, or or you or your spouse. So if they're talking, if they're planting a lot of seeds of kind of negativity and manipulation and toxicity, if they're turning your children against you or your spouse, that's a problem. And that would be a reason to really distance yourself from that relationship. If they are verbally, emotionally, physically, or otherwise abusive to your children, then yes, absolutely. I would say you need to distance yourself to whatever degree that you feel that you need to. But it all goes back to, you've got to keep your children safe. What action are you going to take that's going to keep them safe? If they are narcissistic on the more mild end, where they're just incredibly self-absorbed, and you don't feel like they're necessarily a danger to your children, but that they are just not going to be the most like nurturing grandparents in the world, then when your children are around, I would explain to your children in an age appropriate way, as far as basically not to take this personally, if they don't really want to have a whole lot to do with your children. So I don't know. It's depends on kind of how their narcissism manifests. But if you're going to have a relationship with, if your children are going to have a relationship with them at all, I wouldn't try to make excuses for their behavior. I wouldn't try to put a spin on it and say that it's something that it's not. If your children are picking up on, hey, grandma is mean, or grandpa doesn't seem to care, these kinds of things, just validate that and say, if grandma yelled at them and was really mean, and your child tells you this, to just say, yeah, that was not okay, that grandma talked to you like that. And and then you as an adult need to kind of figure out, okay, how do we prevent this from happening again? So either you make it really clear with grandma of, hey, this is not okay. And if this continues, then we can't, you can't see our children. Like, we're not gonna, and then sometimes that might even mean that this is going to really potentially, it's going to change the dynamic that you have with them, or that your spouse has with them. And so realize there's that ripple effect. But again, your top priority when you're a parent is to protect your children. Even if, let me just say too, yeah, even if you're around a bunch of other, because here's the thing, unless a person experiences abuse of any kind, it's really difficult for them to understand the situation outside of their own experiences. So if a person has never experienced abuse and they hear from you, oh, well, my mom is really terrible to the kids. She's just really mean and nasty and belittling, and she yells at them, or she does this and that. Yeah. It's very common, people that don't understand that have never been on the receiving end of it or experienced it, to try to minimize it and to try to justify it. Oh, well, but she's your mother, and she's doing the best that she knows how to do. And children need to have a relationship with their grandparents, and they're not getting any younger. And so prepare yourself for that. There's all kinds of there's going to be all kinds of incoming messages from other people. But I think it's important that you're grounded enough and you can trust yourself enough to know how to keep your kids safe. And to where when other people kind of give their unwanted advice about that, oh, you should have a relationship with them because they're family, or you should be doing X, Y, and Z, that either that you don't get swayed by that. That you're like, okay, you just smile and nod, like, I'm not even going to get into all that. I don't need to justify my decisions. This was the decision that me and my spouse made. This is how we're going to handle it. This is how we're handling it. So, it's not open to discussion. I appreciate the concern, but it's not open to discussion. Let's talk about something else. So you're just not swayed by that, because lots of people give I call it well-intended bad advice, all kinds of well-intended bad advice about that. So yes, I agree. High Quality says that kind of abuse towards children, or any abuse, in fact, should be illegal. Yes, I agree completely. Yeah, hopefully we'll see more of these kinds of changes in our lifetime, where I feel like we're really at this stage in human evolution where I know it sounds really out there. At the next stage is just this emotional evolution. We've gone through all of it's interesting, you read old books from even 50 years ago, and the way the understandings of people and of just people in general, it's so crazy. Like when you read these books, I don't know, about slavery, it's just, you just think like, how could this have ever happened? Like seriously, what kind of mental gymnastics did people have to do in order for that to be an okay thing? I mean, it's mind-boggling, and it's cool to see that society, we've come such a long way, but it can also be really discouraging because it's like, man, we still have such a long way to go with just the very fundamental understanding of respect for other living beings on this planet, and it's wild. But hopefully, I think we're really headed in a good direction as far as understanding that, that people have value, and it's part of being alive, and that abuse of any kind just doesn't have a place, and that it's as problematic as it is. Yeah, I was watching EK says, Dana, slavery and racism is still mass psychopathy that people want to make excuses for. Yes, it's really wild. That's what's so fascinating to me, is basically how manipulation in general is absolutely fascinating. And of course, the flip side of that is, how can we better equip people to get grounded enough in their reality, grounded enough within themselves, that they're able to best discern what's a problematic situation, and how can they spot a problematic situation, how can they disarm it, and how can they effectively heal from it if they do get tangled up in it. So just that emotional health component is just it's so key. And then when you have mass manipulation on such a level, when you're talking about these horrific, like the Holocaust or slavery, or these horrific crimes against humanity. I mean, they're just these. How does this happen? I think it's so important that we really understand how that kind of that mass psychopathy is transmitted, because until we can understand how is this level of these toxic ideas, how are they being how are people buying into them, how and why are people buying into them, until we can we have to be able to understand that in order to prevent it from happening again. Because these things, history just continues to keep repeating itself, and that's why. Because it's the same stuff that we've all gone through. It's just on a mass level. I guess it's vulnerabilities. It's people have unexamined, or they're unaware of certain vulnerabilities. There's that hook of this ideal promise of some sort of ideal future if they go along with it. And then things just get crazier and crazier. And human beings in general, we don't like to be wrong. And so if we find that we're following the wrong leader, and it's like the Pied Piper and it's leading us off a cliff, it's really difficult for any of us to admit that we're wrong, especially when we've bought into something that's so horrific. And what instead tends to happen is people then double down in their beliefs. That's the whole kind of interesting thing about cognitive dissonance, is people tend to double down, and they become even more of a believer in whatever ideology. This is exactly how the challenge with cults. It's the same dynamic, right? It's just, you've got political cults, and then you have religious ones. It's the same thing. People, no matter how many facts you present to them, no matter how much you try, they just don't see it. It's interesting. It's just, it's fascinating to me. And yeah, really wild. Chris, I just saw your comment and I just lost it. So, yeah. Here, okay, here it is. He says, Dana, I believe that too, that this emotional evolution will lead to our next spiritual evolution. Yeah, I think a lot of the, oh, this is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But I think a lot of the spirituality component is, I think there's so much overlap between emotional intelligence and just and what we consider this relationship with God or with the universe or spirit, whether it's religious or spiritual in nature. That there, I don't know. I think we have to, once we get in tune with ourselves, once we're able to kind of develop a healthy relationship with our ego, basically, and understand ourselves well enough to understand our emotions to where we're not driven by our, just like our wants and needs, but that we've got more of that healthy balance there. That we open ourselves up to so much more and to everything. I don't know, just, it's exciting to think like what could, where society could be if people really did have that, I think, emotional health type of education. Because so much of this stuff, the evils of the world, really, I think a lot of it just it boils down to unprocessed trauma from a lot of people, and that stuff just goes on for generations. It's a whole nature nurture, and you've got a bunch of really deeply dysfunctional people having kids, and then being horrific to them, and then they don't know how to handle their own stuff, and they might do a little bit better with their kids, but this stuff just keeps getting passed down, and like nobody's dealing with anything effectively. And then at some point in the chain, we reach this point where we're like, oh my God, we have the clarity of like what's going on and what we need to do different, and we can start breaking that cycle. But yeah, I could go on and on. I feel like I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight, but we will do a guided meditation thing next week for sure. I know we haven't done that in a few weeks, but so thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and for supporting each other, and just for being here and for everything. So I think let's make 2019 a great year. Let's not wait to see if it becomes great. Let's choose to make it a great year. And let's work really towards taking what happened to us and using it for our highest and greatest good. And then down the road, using it for the highest and greatest good and for others in whatever way that might manifest. So with that being said, good night, everybody. Lots of love to you. You are not alone. You're not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and just sending lots of love to you. Okay, good night.